We do have 81s co-located at my position as the safe house. Laser target line 090.
Hey guys, and welcome back. So we're finally going to be covering some basics of the PRC152 replica series for you. I'm going to kind of break away from my normal scripted routine and dedicate some of these videos to trying to explain the in-depthness of the basics of these radios. There's a lot of information to be covered here, and there is going to be a lot of model particulates that need to be covered. So this video that you're watching right now is going to be dedicated to some extremely basic functions of the radio and more or less field operations and getting these radios to synchronize with your friends or your squad or your team for whenever you guys are LARPing. So basically what I'm going to be kind of covering is the exterior, what some of the knobs and the buttons do, some of the display functions, and then I'm going to be covering some other particulars for basically synchronizing your radios on the field on the fly. So if you guys want to see the coverage of the TCA PRC152 that you see in front of you, I will be doing the full manual. There's about 17 pages of just crazy amount of information that covers the entire manual for the TCA, and then I will be doing the Tri PRC152 as well in a separate video. Those are going to be parts 2 and 3. So both of those videos are going to be done because I still feel like we need to have some sort of video that covers those specifics of each particular radio. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and jump into some of the basics just for an interface purpose, and I will be using some of the manual from this to kind of explain it, and I will be using my Motorola XPR 6550 on the left, and then the Baofeng BF8888 on the right to give you some examples of the basic functionality. So I'm going to knock out a real quick exterior overview. Here's the page from the manual that explains what everything on the front of the radio, on top of the radio, and beside the radio do. If you want to pause that and take a look for yourselves in conjunction with your own, that's what that was there for. So, yeah, basically just from top to bottom, they call the 6-pin NATO connector a quote-unquote headphone jack. It's really for 6-pin NATO push-to-talk receiving ends. So I don't know why they call it a headphone jack. That's just what they call it. And then, of course, I went ahead and took the antenna off just to make it easier to manipulate. So then, of course, the display pad, volume functions, and clear and enter functions, presets, all that stuff as your front pad. Most notably for these radios will sometimes come with the adjustment knobs on top for PT, LD, and CT. I believe CT is standing for CT CSS as part of its functions that it's able to perform. And then PT is just kind of like your normal functions. The middle one is a programmed option if you would like to have it as a programmed option. So just a heads up for those of you in the field. For me, this button is easily manipulatable. I don't know if that's a word. And my cummerbund strap sits right in between the knob and the 6-pin NATO connector. So sometimes this will get toggled and it'll end up sliding over, which is kind of a pain in the butt because it ends up throwing off the entire radio and I can't hear anyone. So just make sure you guys are paying attention as to what these do. The encryption option I'll go over in the 152 video. But yeah, those are your basic displays and the knobs and all the functions and all that jazz. So here's the next page, which basically explains the A/B switches, the PTT key, the dual tone monitor frequency modes, and the data interface. So obviously that data interface will be for programming it via computer, and there is appropriate data, USB to data connector cables that you can buy for the radio itself. Now, I haven't been able to find any that have this connecting set up. I've only been able to find connectors that hook directly into the PTT. So, if you guys know where to pick this connector up specifically, go ahead and leave a link in the comments just so other people can have it, or the information on what type of connector it is. That would be great, and I will pin it. And then on the other side, of course, is the push-to-talk, and then the band switch and the DTMF options right there. So that pretty much covers the entirety of the exterior of the radio. So we are going to jump into the more important things. So when you first turn your radio on, you are going to get a display that basically looks like this. There are going to be two sets of numbers, one on the bottom, one on the top, and then a whole bunch of other letters and acronyms and meanings in between. So for all those acronyms and meanings in between, I will be covering that in the TCA full manual breakdown. So I'm not going to be covering it in this video because this video is more or less describing how to, on the fly, synchronize your radios with the other people's radios on the field, and what the numbers mean and how to correct any problems that you might be running into with synchronization of your radio and someone else's radio. So on the top is a frequency number, and on the bottom is a frequency number. You can see that arrow on the left-hand side, basically right there, explaining, signifying which number it's on. That is a VHF frequency. The bottom is a UHF frequency. I'm not going to cover UHF and VHF frequencies too much in depth. You have very high frequency and ultra high frequency. And those are basically just numbers on the spectrum that cover allocated frequencies as such. If you would like to see a video on VHF and UHF frequencies, that's what YouTube's for. So on the top is a MURS channel. I'm going to get this out of the way. And then on the bottom is a FRS channel. Just for all you ham fuds out there that think what I'm doing is in any way, shape, or form illegal or being done without a license, neither of these require any sort of license to operate off a simplex. Just to get that out of the way, these frequencies are good to go. So going back to what I was describing on the exterior part of the radio, the cool part about the TCA is that I can toggle in between UHF and VHF. So if I need to toggle real quick between the bands, I can do so with that side switch. Now, what does this really mean? Well, if everyone is synced up and talking on a VHF frequency, this can cover a multitude of radios. So let's say I wanted to talk on the UHF band. Actually, let's start with the VHF band, just so we're kind of off where I left off. So let's say I wanted to start with or talk to someone on the VHF band. The Motorola on your left is on the MURS2 channel. And you can kind of see it on the display there. It's not going to show the numbers because it's already pre-programmed to show the channel name rather than the frequency numbers. So, but they are the same in this case. So the frequency numbers you see on the Harris are exactly the same on the Motorola. It's just that the Motorola does not display it. And you can actually do that in channel mode with the Harris as well if you would like to. You do have the option to program that. So I want to talk to someone on the MURS2 channel on a simplex. So you can see it key up on that side, and then you can see it key up on the Harris side. And then maybe I want to talk to someone on the UHF channel. Well, all I have to do is toggle this down to the UHF option, and now the Baofeng, which is in UHF, will key up as such. And the same goes for the return side on the Harris. So something I want to cover really quick is just simplex versus duplex, and what exactly that means. So what you see right now are two radios. That is a simplex, a communication device to communication device. So in this case, it was using the MURS2 channel to communicate with each other. The receiving frequency was 151.880, and the transmitting frequency was 151.880. So it is using the same frequency to both receive and transmit the frequencies. Now, just as a visualization, I'm going to add in this Baofeng and say that the Baofeng is a duplexer. So forget that it's a Baofeng, pretend it's a duplexer for a minute. So the transmitting frequency is 151.880. So 151.880 goes to the duplexer. The duplexer spits it out as 152.500. So this radio, in order to talk back to this radio, will talk to the duplexer at 151.880 to the duplexer, and the duplexer will spit it out as 152.500. So that's basically your simplex versus duplex radio and the concept of a repeater. And what a repeater is doing, a repeater can operate off a simplex if it really wanted to. Most of the time what a repeater is doing is it's taking the transmission and amplifying it. So most of the time when it comes to repeaters, they are operating in a duplexing capacity, meaning they are using two different frequencies, one frequency for the transmission tone and one separate frequency for the receiving tone. I'm just covering this for context about what I'm about to talk about with offset and steps. So for offset, in radio engineering, a frequency offset is an intentional slight shift on broadcast radio frequency to reduce interference with other transmitters. So the reason I'm covering offset is because this is part one of the most common mistake I see when people program their radios, or why they can't transmit anything or why they can't receive anything, is because the offset is different on two separate radios. And this is why it's so important to synchronize your radios with your team before going out in the field and really just doing some thorough testing, receiving and transmitting. So to get to that option, I went ahead and turned the backlight on for you guys too. The glare wasn't as bad. So we're going to go ahead and go to offset. So the offset right now is zeroed out. And it's zeroed out because the offset on the Motorola was zeroed out. And what I mean by zeroed out is on 151.88000 for the Motorola, it is zeroed out. And if you guys want to check out what offset means and how it kind of relates to radios themselves, there's some good videos out there on YouTube that you guys can check out. And I'll leave some links in the description for any of you who are interested in learning more about exactly what offsets do and how it relates to frequency numbers. But just in terms of synchronizing your Harris with another Harris, or a 152 to a 148 or a 152 to a Baofeng, you guys can just basically synchronize. You can have offset numbers, or you can just choose to zero them out. I choose to zero them out. It's just easier to leave it on a zeroed out base for everyone on when I get to whatever operation I'm going to. So that is offset, and I'll probably end up describing that a little bit better in relating to the TCA in the TCA manual video. So step increases or step frequencies is frequency or tuning steps 2.5, 5, 10, 15, etc. And there's also 20, 12.5 is the increment that the radio tunes when you tune the VFO dial. If you have a 5 kilohertz step and your VFO is set to 145.000 megahertz, when you turn the dial, it would go to 145.005, then 145.010, and etc. If you had 20 kilohertz steps, then tuning the dial would change from 145.000 megahertz to 145.020, then 145.040, and etc. So that was just a little definition to read off to you guys. To explain this in terms of the 152, you'll see that we're currently at 151.88000. If I go plus on my frequency, it changes to 151.89250. If you were to take 89250 minus 880, you would get 1.1250, because the step increase is 12.5K in terms of the kilohertz. And again, these are kilohertz inside of megahertz. So the step increase is coming from this option on the number 19. So step 12.50 kilohertz. So the reason I have it set to that is because the Motorola on the MURS2 channel is set to 12.5K as a default. So there are tons of different options, and there's tons of different step increases and little miniature adjustments that you can make without having a conventional VFO dial on your radio. So what this is doing is this is allocating frequency space tighter and tighter and tighter. So as more frequency space is used up, or more channels are using more frequency space, you get more traffic. And when you start getting more traffic, you need ways to space out the traffic. So let's say you have a group of people that are running on 151.88000, and you want your team to sort of be on the same MURS frequency, but you're running into too much traffic, then you would just make the numbers tighter. That's a really loose definition on frequency steps. However, it just brings back to the point that if you guys are going to be running 152s with each other, you want those frequency steps to all be synchronized. You want your offsets to be synchronized. You want your steps to be synchronized. So you guys are communicating all this. And then it goes for people that in your squad that might be running bow things as well. You would be like, hey, this is what we're doing on the 152s. Go ahead and change your steps and change your offsets, so everything is synchronized. So that's just kind of something to know in terms of synchronizing those radios up. And if you guys have any questions on how that relates to just programming on the 152 or excuse me, the Tri, I'll be covering that on the Tri as well, and how to do that in terms of button functions. So right now, as you've seen me manipulating these buttons and such, this hitting clear on here is specifically for the TCA. I don't know how it works on the new Tri. I'll have to play around with that and see how that does work on the new Tri. But for the TCA, I will be covering that in the full TCA video, blah 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 manual. But right now, that's just how to explain the steps. One more small thing I wanted to cover that might be a TCA particular is the function with the contacts and the function with PTTs. Where a lot of people seem to get hung up on is that their radio is not synchronizing, or it's not detecting the push-to-talk very well. So I'm going to cover the menu option first for that. If you come into, let me find it, Mic MD, which is option number 15 on the TCA, you're going to want to set it to on. So we're going to set it to on, enter. You want the Mic MD option on. For the Tri, for the TRI, I do not know if the new TRI series has an option that needs to be turned on or toggled in order to detect the 6-pin. So what happens when the Mic MD setting is on should be a positive detection of the 6-pin NATO connector. So as I plug it in, you can see right here there was a positive connection signifying that it is detecting that the contacts are hooked up to the radio. And sometimes it will detect it, sometimes depending on the type of fitting that's in the 6-pin connector itself. Sometimes this pin won't fit right, and it will not connect if it does not line up with the pins correctly. So as you can see, the option went away as I unplugged it. So that's just something to be cautious about when it comes to contacts or Sordens or whatever headset you guys are running and push-to-talks with the TCA at least. When I get a chance to play around with the TRI, I will cover that. And I will also cover this again in the manual, in the TCA breakdown manual. So that's all for now, guys. If you guys want to see any in particular details, or if you guys have any questions that you want me to cover, or even something that might be worth an entire short video itself, let me know. If you guys want to see more in the field testing of this radio with other radios, or this radio with other TRIs, or anything like that, let me know and I'll try to put something together for you guys. The TRI and the TCA manual videos will be covered extensively. It'll probably be a longer video than this. So just bear with me. I'm trying to pump these out as fast as I can and try to make them short. It looks like this one's already going to be nearly a 20-25 minute video itself. There's just so much information to cover, and it doesn't help that I drag out every single video with my talking. So thanks again, guys. Please, please, please leave feedback. I'm not doing that for subs. I'm not doing it for likes or comments or anything. This is purely informational because there's a serious lack of information regarding these radios in particular. So yeah, just let me know. Thanks, guys.